Welcome to the AtlantECO podcast, where we talk about the science behind the AtlantECO project, the Atlantic Ocean, and the human adventures experienced along the way. Here, we have conversations with guests from around the world who work together so that we can better understand, manage, and protect the ocean. So let's embark on the journey of AtlantECO and discover the world that lies above and beneath the surface of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. Welcome back to the AtlantECO podcast. In today's episode, we are talking about a different region of the ocean, and this time we are heading towards the Pacific Ocean. As part of the Mission Microbiomes, the latest expedition of the Tara Ocean Foundation, the schooner and the team on board and on land went to study the ocean off the coast of Chile to understand some important scientific questions that a consortium of Chilean partners called CEODOS were interested to answer. And our guest today is Alejandro Maass, one of the coordinators of this initiative, and he is here to tell us all about it. But first, let's introduce our guest. Hello, Alejandro, and welcome to our podcast. I cannot wait to hear about the Pacific today.
Hello, Eloise, from the Pacific coast. So it's a pleasure for me to be here and, as Alejandro, but also as a representative of CEODOS. So this program, we want with this program to be a real partner of AtlantECO during the next year for the study of the ocean.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to it as well. And I guess before we talk about CEODOS, I would like for us to know you a little bit better. And it's something that we do at the start of every episode. So I'm going to ask you if you could tell us where and how your connection with the ocean started, how it has influenced your journey that has led to where you are today and doing what you do.
Thanks for the question. It's complicated to tell this long history, but essentially I am a mathematician. I started in mathematics in the 90s, and I think I spent until now all my one important part of my scientific life in doing dynamical systems, so systems that moves, and I try to understand from a mathematical perspective what it means to move, essentially. But 23 years ago, so motivated by the sequencing of human genome, Chile launched some programs in genomics, and we start to work on that with some colleagues here at the Center of Mathematical Modeling. And we spent more than 10 years working in the Atacama Desert, and that was for biotechnological reasons. We wanted to do some technology using bacteria to bio-leach copper. Chile is one of the most important countries in the world for copper production. And this pushed me to create another center. It's called Center for Genome Regulation with biologists. And I think this was the starting point to really do some bioinformatics and system biology in the 2012, so 10 years ago. And in 2015, 16, I don't remember really, I met Eric Carcenti and André Abreu, that they were planifying the first program that from FFM in France to found students from Latin America to go to Europe and work with Tara. So one of my students went to Tara, and this was the first contact, I think, with the ocean. Of course, Chile is a country of the ocean, but typically we live in the valleys. So Santiago is in the valley, so we're not really to the ocean, even if we live to the ocean. And so afterwards, Damian Eveillard, so a scientist from Tara in Nantes, and Colomban and Daniele in Naples, we start to discuss, to be friends, and I think all the dreams of the ocean start. I think this was more or less a fast history. By the way, CEODOS in our minds was something like Tara Humboldt. At the beginning, we wanted to take a boat and go up through Humboldt Current and obtain biodiversity. Of course, this is not really realistic. So finally, we developed a good expedition that was CEODOS.
Excellent. And so if we talk about CEODOS now, can you explain firstly what the initiative is, who is involved, and what the objectives are?
CEODOS, so this is, maybe I don't need to explain the word, but CEODOS is like CO2, yes, but Spanish. And this is the consequence of the discussions I said before with Daniele, Colomban, Damian, Andrea Abreu in Tara. And what we decided to do when Tara launched the Mission Microbiome expedition, we want to do the Chilean coast or the Pacific side of AtlantECO, and we start to link centers of excellence in Chile. We finally end with 8 centers of excellence made of biologists, people experiencing genomics, mathematics, bioinformatics, data science. And what we decide to do is to develop a transdisciplinary project to quantify the physiological state of the organisms that are responsible for the absorption of CO2 in our coast and other greenhouse gases in our ocean. Of course, this was the starting point of CEODOS. This is the name, but I think the main point of the expedition, like AtlantECO, is to understand this link, this relation between biodiversity and the environment, and how changing the environment modified or has implications in the biodiversity, and vice versa, to how biodiversity in the Chilean coast, a change in this biodiversity has impact in climate or in the environment. Yeah, so this is essentially what CEODOS is, and so it's a running project. We think that will be modified many times in the future, and what we want to do is to pick this Mission Microbiome expedition as the first step of CEODOS. We want to repeat this every 4 or 5, I don't know how many years, to get more and more insights on the state of the ocean in Chile. This is kind of a baseline on biodiversity and parameters of the environment where this biodiversity lives along Chile. The expedition, in fact, is 3 steps expedition. The expedition in Chile was the first part is a very clean ocean in the fjords in the south of Chile, where you have many gradients coming, for example, from the glaciers in the south of Chile. So salinity gradients. This is the first part of the expedition to understand or get baseline of biodiversity and the ocean in a very pristine place of the planet. I think this will be a very valuable resource, even not only for Chile, but other places in the world. The second part is more contaminated area or more human productive place of Chile, for example, place where we produce salmon in the ocean. So there's a lot of perturbations to biodiversity in those areas, and we wanted to understand that too. So this is a contrast of pristine areas with, I don't want to say contaminated, but eventually contaminated areas. And the last part is more north-south of Chile, where are very important upwellings. So it's a very important area to understand the productivity of the ocean. And I think maybe this is the longest part of the expedition. Again, this part will be very important for the comparison with some areas of AtlantECO, in particular the southern part of Africa.
Yeah, excellent. So, and if we go back to Mission Microbiomes, and the studies that you completed in Chile over a period of 4 months, actually, these were the first ones conducted during the expedition. As you said, it was a kind of a mirror of what was going to be done for AtlantECO on the Atlantic side. And all those protocols were first, I guess, tested, optimized when they were studying along the coast of Chile. So can you tell us about the different regions of the ocean that you studied? What was so particular about these regions, and what were the scientific questions that you were trying to get an answer for?
Yes, so as I said before, but I maybe I will put more in the context. Chile, as you know, is a long country, so more than 5,000 kilometers, and has more than 100,000 square kilometers of territorial sea. So it's a true natural laboratory for the effects of climate change, yes, and other causes of the change in biodiversity. That's why it's very important, I think, to make this expedition in Chile, and be coupled with the Mission Microbiome and AtlantECO. So in particular, the Chilean ocean can be an emitter in certain areas of oxygen. There's a lot of sequestering greenhouse gases in other places. As I said before, you have these pristine areas in the south of Chile. So Chile, as a natural laboratory, is kind of a zone where you can see a lot of phenomena that we cannot concentrate in a unique place in the planet. Particular question will be to the calculation of the capacity to absorb carbon, for example. The other scientific question is related with the anoxic areas in Chile and how they move and how they impact the biodiversity of the ocean.
So when you talk about anoxic, so what does it mean? It means no oxygen.
Areas with a very low quantity of oxygen. So in Chile, you have those areas, yes, and it seems that they move. By the way, this is some consequence of the first observation in this expedition. You have these upwellings also in the center south of Chile. So it's a source of nutrients, and this is a very productive area in Chile, and we need to understand how it changes, how it moves, how it impacts the biodiversity. Of course, all those systems are not static, so are dynamical systems that has dynamical consequence. And I think those are the most important questions. Of course, the Mission Microbiome also was interested in plastic pollution in the surface. So also this is another, let's say, transversal question to all of the expedition, understand how we're polluting the oceans in the pristine areas and in the very populated areas in the north of Chile. And maybe last interesting question is understand the ocean in the very northern part of Chile, where you have the Atacama Desert in the continent that is very, very desertic area. And I think this contrast is very interesting. It's of biodiversity and I see cross information that is in the ocean and in the Atlantic. Very important to be studied.
Yeah, so you went to very different regions all along the coast to study the impact of different environments, different factors on the biodiversity and how everything moves around. And these experiments were carried out about 3 years ago now, so that was a long time ago. Can you already share a few results with us? What have you learned so far and what is still to happen?
Yes, it's 3 years, maybe less. I need to count less than that because it's very stressed. Yes?
Let's say 2.5.
Yes, 2.5. Yes, the expedition in Chile was really along the COVID period. So most of Chilean labs that are involved in the expedition were really closed. In Chile, this was very severe rules, yes, in the universities. So we start to reopen last year and the end of last year. So I think we're in some way we're starting to process the material. What is a good news that we got funding at the end of 2021 to sequence part of the diversity that we obtained in Chile. So we already sequenced about 2,000 bacterial metagenomes. We already have this information. So I think that what we're doing now is just ordering the information, finishing some experiments that have to do in Chile, starting to assemble those metagenomes to order metadata too. So I think that from now, maybe to March, maybe April, we will have very exciting information to study, in particular, from my perspective, of course, the bacterial metagenome will provide a lot of information to compare all the gradients that we sample in Chile. So we have some ideas of what happened in the ocean just by observations, like old style oceanography, maybe. For the moment, it's just the ordering part. I think we have a little advance on AtlantECO in this perspective, just because we are before. And I think this is important, I think, for all the expedition, Mission Microbiome, to look to what we obtain and try to see what are the connections we will have with the other part, with the Atlantic side in Africa and South America. But this is where we are. In fact, we're handling the data, more and more processed data, and I think that in 6 months or maybe less, we'll have kind of set of physicochemical parameters and biology to put together and get the first information, I think, on some unique areas in Chile.
So that'll be information coming from the sequencing and everything, but from, as you say, more classical observations, did you find anything or did you confirm anything about the ocean just along the Chilean coast?
Yes, I'm not really expert, but I think just discussing with my co-director, so Camila Fernandez, who is oceanographer. So she said, for example, that the anoxic zone in the ocean along Chile, in fact, was not only located in places where typically it was located, I think in the north, but now it's really along the coast of Chile, or much longer than expected, I think. The other point, I think, is this microplastic. Microplastic was present almost everywhere, maybe not in the same concentrations, but that means there's no longer, I think, a pristine area in relation to the microplastic. So those are, it's a constant. And the last, I think, very important point for our expedition is that we confirm from some of the data that we get in the boat, that Chile is really active, extremely active in its capacity to treat the greenhouse gases. I think we have other evidence also from satellites and other projects we have at CMM that this is true. So, in fact, I think to compare these observations with the genomics and other kind of biological information and physical information that we will get from the experiments that our colleagues are doing in Chile, I think will be very exciting. It's very nice to constate something and after try to really put science on that and see that this is really true and what are the drivers of such situations or systems that we have in the coast of Chile.
Yeah, so looking forward to hear more about those results when they come about. I'm sure we'll work together on all these results and share them as they come out. And to end our conversation today, I'd like to go back to your kind of experience from when Tara was in Chile. I mean, as you said, it was during a particularly challenging time as there were so many restrictions in place because of the pandemic. But I am still sure that you have some great memories of that time.
Oh, yes, of course. In fact, the COVID at the end, we were adapted to that, like biodiversity. Yes, we are part of the biodiversity. It was hard, but I think in my perspective of mathematicians, so the first thing I want to say is I was so impressed how, people working in the ocean work. I think it's so difficult, it's so challenging. Just go to the sea, put a boat, and try to get good samples. So I realized the first thing that, of course, you can imagine that it exists. I am really sensitive to, to this, when people can do something, yes, with their hands, with their, they can go to the nature and do something, because maybe this is one of my weakness. And I really admire what they did, in fact, to get water, and those young researchers in the boat, postdocs, and Marines, just filtering water and really trying to get information for so important problem. I think this is my first impression, even with the COVID. Yes, they resist 4 months in the boat without going out. It was particularly tough on that. For me, it was really good scientific experience in this direction. The second one is more related to maybe with my age and the way I think science must move for those big challenges. I think you cannot continue to do science like, I go to my individual laboratory, I treat this data, and of course, there's a paper. Yes. I think the problem that we're trying to handle now with those expeditions is so important that this forced us to change a little bit. And this, I think, it was a nice experience to live it. I think the Mission Microbiomes and CEODOS is a way to live in reality something that we are forced to change in science. Those expeditions are, the product is not only the big important papers, it's really to push society to have tools, yes, to protect the ocean or to do something with the ocean based on science. And for that, we need to change to the way we think. We need to think in a transdisciplinary way. And at some level, inside the boat, we live that. I think it's really transdisciplinary. The main point is to have good samples to study the ocean. And everybody's there with their expertise, without hierarchy, to get those samples. And now with the science, I think it's the same. And this will be maybe one of the most exciting researchers in my life, is try to think a problem without hierarchy. This is not a mathematical problem. There's a lot of mathematics. There's not an oceanography problem. There's a lot of oceanography. And I think this, for me, this mission is related to that too. Yes, to this complementarity that must be virtuous, but more than that, must be very, we need to think about that. Yes, it's an organization that is not trivial. We need to think, to organize, and it's very funny and interesting. And I hope in 10 years we will produce, I think, something that is valuable for society and the problem we're thinking. And maybe the last part also is that we work together, researchers from any continent. And as we know, in fact, the good ideas, fortunately, are not concentrated in one continent or one geographic area. And from this, I'm sure will emerge the best solutions to what we are doing.
Yeah, that's what we can hope for, that we come up with solutions that are relevant for reality, not just for creating papers, and that they are just stored in somebody's drawer or computer and never to be used again. So what is important, as you say, is to make something that is relevant for the protection of the ocean, and that is something we're all working together to achieve. Good reflections to end up on for this conversation today. So Alejandro, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to explain what you have done and what is still about to happen with the CEODOS project. We wish you all the best, and of course we are going to keep in touch because of the continued collaboration between CEODOS and AtlantECO, and maybe we'll be able to share even more results in a few months to come.
Thank you, Luis. I think this is a great experience to speak with you today.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode and look forward to seeing you next time. You can follow the AtlantECO project on our website on www.atlanteco.eu, and you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All the links and information on the project and on today's episode is in the show notes. AtlantECO is a project funded under Horizon 2020, a European Union research and innovation programme.